Dreams Productions branch office. I'm Janessa J. Champagne, and I'm North Dakota's trash queen of glam, geek, and gore. Let's zoom in a little bit so you don't have to look at the ugly border on the edge of my backdrop here in the Champagne Dreams Productions branch office, my filming studio. Hello, welcome, how are we doing? Happy day. Oh, and we're starting, so we're starting our buffering thing again. And this time it zoomed me back out. So let's see if this is going to continue. Hello, Janet. How's it going? YouTube is always on some shenanigans. So, yes, hello, welcome. This is our last, hello, Mama Champagne. This is our last Pride Chat. This is our last Wednesday night live stream of June. Now, if you have looked at my live tab, and if you've looked at my posts, I mentioned this as well, but we are going to continue Wednesday night live streams in July, but we are switching it up. We are doing Wacky Wednesdays. They're going to be at 7:30. So we've been at 7 p.m. Central. They're going to be at 7:30 Central, just because I usually work up until 7, and so it's one thing to just come on and do a talkie one at 7. That's a little bit easier, but if we're going to be doing makeup and stuff, then we need to be a little bit more mindful of the time, and so we are moving those to 7:30, so just be ready for those to be a half hour later. But we are going to do Wacky Wednesdays, and what Wacky Wednesdays means is that we are going to be doing colorful foundation looks. So I had said that 2026 was going to be the year that I start busting out more of my colorful foundations. We did do a purple look for the end of the year when we launched the color of the year, which is Electric Violet. Electric Violet or Electric Purple, I always forget which one it is because they are both Pantone colors. But we have the hex code, and there's a Get Ratch with Me that you can watch all about that. And someday, by the time we're done with the year, then I will remember the title. Hello, CJ, how's it going? And yeah, so we are going to be doing colorful foundation looks every Wednesday in July. So we're going to start with green. We're going to do a very Elphaba Wicked green foundation kind of look, an orange foundation look, a red foundation look, and then a metallic. I had put on the poll, I put metallic gold, but we might mix a couple metallics. And hello, CJ, how's it going? And then the last Wednesday, because I was a dope, and when I first started putting it together, I was like, oh, there's going to be 4 Wednesdays in July, so let's put up a poll with the 4 options. And then I realized that the first was a Wednesday, and so that means that there are 5 Wednesdays in July. So then I had to come up with another one, and we're going to do some sort of pastel, and I think we're going to do like a pastel ombre. I don't know if we'll do like a full rainbow, but I have thought about doing like a pastel rainbow foundation look that like starts up here and goes at a diagonal where it's like pink into peach, into yellow, into green, into blue, into purple. And then for the eyes, just doing maybe like black liner, black brows, and then maybe like iridescent glitter on the lid to kind of give some sort of eye look, but really letting it be all about the foundation. And so we'll kind of play with that on the last Wednesday of July. We will do that on the last Wednesday of July. And yeah, that's going to be our plan for July. So I'm very excited about that, and there is a new video up on my channel if you haven't seen it yet. Get Ratchet with Me using Color Reveal Barbie. I don't think I have her sitting here. I thought maybe I had Color Reveal Barbie. We had a strawberry themed, it was a fruit themed collection, and we did a strawberry themed Barbie. I'm having tech problems, but getting there. Oh no, CJ, I hate that. YouTube is always on its shenanigans, and that reminded me also that I need to switch to all messages, so let me go ahead and do that. I also need to, I don't know if anybody else, I had shared one of the clips on my post tab. I need to find how to watch Tiptoe, because my understanding is that you can only really do it legally in the UK, in Britain. So you kind of have to like sail the high seas, if you know what I'm saying, if you want to watch it. They have put a lot of little clips out, but I want to see Tiptoe, which is the new Russell T Davies show with Clive something and Alan Cumming, and it's so good. I had posted, Alan Cumming has this speech about pronouns, and how straight people are just never satisfied. We talked about that in a previous live, but there's another one that I've seen now that I'm like, I haven't 100% decided, but if I do, I might use it as an audition monologue, because next fall the Empire Theater Company is doing Misery. And I think, I've never read the stage show of Misery, so I don't know how it is. I'm going to try to get a hold of a copy. I'm a little bit worried that my Swiss cheese brain, because I'm sure Annie Wilkes is a big part or whatever, and I don't know who's directing it yet. I don't know if they're open to like drag casting, but I would audition for Annie, and I would only play Annie. I think that could be, depending on how well it's written, that could be a bucket list role of being Annie Wilkes in Misery. And there is this great moment where Alan Cumming again has this other sort of like monologue, and it's so good. And my understanding is that there's some sort of hate crime or something that happens, because you kind of see like police lights in the background. And so the whole show is about these two neighbors, Alan Cumming and this guy whose name I can never remember. But they are neighbors. They live next to each other in townhouses or whatever. And the one guy like owns a gay bar, and the other one, I don't know what he does, but he's like, they've been kind of friends for years, and they've lived next to each other for years, and things like get more heated and get out of control, and it becomes this whole thing. But there's a lot of like back and forth and talking about identity and talking about how things have changed for queer people and all this stuff. And so there's some sort of like attack or event or something that happens, and I guess this Clive guy, and that's the other thing, because I think the other actor's name is Clive in real life, and Alan Cumming's character is named Clive, so I don't know if I'm just mixing that up in my head. But the straight guy, we'll just call him the straight guy, Alan Cumming and the straight guy. So there's some sort of event or attack or something that happens at the gay bar, near the gay bar or something, and for some reason the straight guy is there and like intervenes or helps out or something. And so Alan Cumming is chasing after him to be like, thanks for helping, let me get you a cab. Or he's like, I don't need it, I've already called one, all this kind of stuff. And he's kind of standoffish. And I'm not going to say too much about it because I don't really know, but I've watched some of the clips, so I have an idea of what's kind of happening. I think there's something going on with the straight guy's kids, and maybe one of them is queer, and that seems to like lead to this explosion between the two neighbors. But I don't know too much about it, so I don't want to say too much. But so then they have this thing, because then he's like, I've got her blood on my arm. Do you think that's safe? And that's where then Alan Cumming is like, yes, it's not like the old days. And he's like, oh, well, you would know, wouldn't you? And he's like, I would know. And he goes into, and he's like, yes, I became positive in 1994. I've been HIV positive. And he's like, so I would know because I've lived this and you haven't. And he's like, oh, and the way he phrases it, the reason why I really like this monologue is he's like, and I'm sorry because I've lived this and you haven't. And then all of a sudden he's just like, this thing comes over and he's like, and you know what pisses me off? Me, because I keep saying please and thank you and I'm sorry and all of this shit to people like you for 6 days, and it's this whole thing where he finally like lets out all of this rage, and the guy is just like kind of taken aback of like he doesn't really understand like why his behavior is offensive. Typical straight people. Some of you are fine. There's a lot of queerdos that watch this too, but for those out there, some of you are delightful. But so like he just like doesn't understand it. And then like Alan Cumming gives him $20 for the cab. And then he's like, and you say thank you. You say thank you to me. Like, I gave you 20 pounds, Clive. You say thank you to me. And so it's just really, and it gets really, really intense. And finally, he just kind of like begrudgingly is like, thank you. And then takes off in the cab. And Alan Cumming has this moment where he's like, yes, and then takes a bow. And I think that the way he does it is very impactful. And I think the way that I would do it auditioning for Annie Wilkes is I would use the like way that it builds to kind of show off, because Annie's crazy, right? But she doesn't always seem crazy. Sometimes she seems very nice and very sweet. And so showing off the pin turns that she sometimes does, where it's like, oh, so sweet and nice, and then oh, and pull back. So I think there's some opportunity there to really craft it in a way that it could kind of show off a potential sort of like emotional roller coaster for Annie. So I am thinking about auditioning for that. I don't have to think about it for a while because the show is in like November. And so auditions will probably be, so if it's like early, like the show rehearsals will probably be through October. And so probably sometime in September, the auditions will be. I mean, it's almost July. Jesus Christ. How is it almost July? How is that even possible? How is that even possible that it's almost July? I do not understand. I do not compute. I do not know how to handle that information. But it is almost July. And so, but that means I have July, August, and then into, so I have 2 months to kind of get ready for that and think about if I want to audition, because it is a big part. I'm what they call a park and bark. I learned that when I did Hairspray, because I like having those parts where you have like a few impactful moments where you come on stage and like you do something fun, or maybe you have a little number and they like put you, so that's why it's called park and bark, is because they put you somewhere and you sing the song, and all the talented little kids that have been doing dance classes since they were 3 years old, they get to dance and twirl and all this kind of stuff around you. And then afterwards, everyone will come up to you and be like, oh my God, you had such an amazing number. And you can be like, thank you. Knowing it's sort of like with eyeshadow for our makeup fans. It's kind of like how a lot of times you build like a whole sort of look with mats, and the mats are doing all of the heavy lifting. And then you put like this amazing shimmer on the lid, and people are like, that eye look is spectacular. Look at it shine. Look at it. Yes, she ate, mama. Like all that kind of shit. And then you're just like, yeah, but the mats are doing all the work. That's how that's what I like on stage. I like to be a bit of a park and bark, or somebody who comes on, has a few funny things to say, and then goes off, comes on a little bit later, has a few funny things to say. So being like a principal character like that, that's a lot of memorization when my world is kind of crazy, but we shall see. We'll keep you updated. Before we get into our, we're already 11 minutes in, 12 minutes in, and I haven't even started talking about the topic, but having a little bit of cherry float Coke Zero. Another little update for those of you who are following the saga with Dakota Outright. Pride is over now. I haven't heard too much officially about how it went. I did kind of hear, hey Grace, how's it going? I did kind of hear anecdotally from a few people that it was much smaller, as we kind of expected. There was no show, and so attendance I think was smaller than usual, but I haven't actually heard any official kind of things about how things have gone. However, I have received an official like email from Dakota Outright with a formal apology, and there is an invitation to have sort of structured talks about how we move forward, if we move forward, if I am involved and in what capacity, and you know, how we prepare the drag shows for the future. And I will have to say that like I am open to those conversations, because another part of the formal apology is it's not exactly the way that I set it out in my initial thing, but they are making donations because of this situation. They are donating $1,000, and they are donating $200 each to, I can't remember them all, and my email's on my phone, so I can't like pull it up really quickly, but the two charities that I had named were Trans Lifeline and the Sacred Pipe Collective, I think. And those two are each getting $200. So the two organizations that I called out are going to get $200. The River Valley Rainbow Seniors. There's a group out of Fargo that is collecting like queer history from North Dakota, and talking to seniors, elders in our community, and collecting stories and things like that. And so collecting North Dakota queer history. And so they're getting $200. There's a group called Transportation North Dakota. I don't know what that is. It sounds like it's some sort of trans group, but I don't know what they do. Because I was actually, that's why I went with Trans Lifeline, but I was trying to find like trans organizations in North Dakota. So I'm interested to learn more of what they do. And I can't remember what the fifth group is, the one that I always forget. But yeah, so 5 different groups are getting $200 each. So they are making a monetary donation. So there is some sort of like, you know, remediation, like some sort of, what am I looking for? Um, yes, so Sacred Pipe is a Native American organization, and I chose them because they do a conference every year, and they do a lot of work around missing and murdered Indigenous women. And one of the things that made me too political was that I talk about the fact that we need to address white privilege within queer communities, and we need to address the way that white queers are not showing up for queers of color in our community. And especially in North Dakota, we have a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of racism everywhere. Like, there's a lot of white queers that need to do some work on racism. But especially in North Dakota, especially, we have a large Native American population. And so I thought that's why focusing on that for that particular request, that was actually a recommendation from my friend Nanners, because she, I think, has attended one of the convention or one of the conferences that they do. What is the difference between a conference and a convention? I don't know. But they do, I think it's a conference. So they do a conference on missing and murdered Indigenous women, and they do other programming. So, so that's why I had picked them. And yeah, I'll have to try to, maybe at some point I'll put something up on the post tab with just kind of a little update of what the 5 groups are, because those are the 4 that I remember. And there's one other that the minute I look at it, I'll be like, oh yeah, it's that. But right now I just, it will not stay in my brain. So, all right. So we've had our little chats. It only buffered the one time, so hopefully everything's going well. I've got it set to all comments, so I should be seeing all the comments that come in. We should be rocking and rolling. Excuse me, pretty girl. My son is Native American, and at protests and things, the women wear the red. Yeah, the red hand. Yeah. And that was something that I wanted to include that, because I think that that's something that our queer communities could do a better job of being allies for. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about some queer movies. Let's start with the main topic here. Is I said we were going to talk a little bit about TOO WONG FOO. Thanks for everything, Julie Newmar. This is Priscilla. I don't know what that accent was, and I hope it never comes back again. But versus Priscilla, The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. So if you have not seen either of those, I absolutely recommend Pride. There's only a few days left. You got a few days left. Let's get it in there. I think TOO WONG FOO is on Tubi for free, and I think that Priscilla might be on Tubi, so you might be able to watch both of them for free. There's actually, I've been really impressed with all of the movie selections. The horror selection on Tubi is really good, but also they've had quite a few. I was looking to watch The Celluloid Closet, and I found that on there. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but yeah, so if you don't know, either TOO WONG FOO or Priscilla, they both came out about the same time. They were made at the same time, and they were set to be released around the same time. This was the 90s, so like, and this was early mid 90s, so like it was done around 1994. I think they both officially have a release date of like 1995, but Priscilla came out several months earlier. They delayed about a year on TOO WONG FOO because Priscilla was coming out, and they have a similar sort of structure. So it's sort of the like fish out of water kind of story. So you have these 3 drag queens from the city who go to the rural area for some sort of event or some sort of thing that's happening. And then they encounter a bunch of locals, they have a bunch of adventures, and then they eventually return back to the city, back to the urban at least. And they've learned along the way, and the people that they've encountered have learned, and we all hug and cry and learn and grow and all that kind of shit, right? So TOO WONG FOO is the one that's often more known to American viewers, United States viewers, because obviously that was the one that was made, produced, and released in the United States. The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert was actually filmed in Australia with Australian accents with Australian actors. They did have Australian accents, but they were actors. Hello, Tanya. Nice to see you. And so they both have this like urban to rural to urban story, and they have this sort of like learning, love and acceptance and tolerance and all that kind of shit. So they all have that kind of stuff in it. But while they are very similar sort of story structure, the way that the two films treat their characters is actually very different. And I think it's worth talking about. Now, I still absolutely love TOO WONG FOO. I think it's absolutely worth watching. But if you have seen TOO WONG FOO and you haven't seen Priscilla, you should watch Priscilla. Because in terms of how it treats the characters and how it presents queerness, Priscilla is such a better movie. There are some things in terms of like the drag aspect of it. Some of the like costume changes that they show in Priscilla, if people watch that and think that that's what they're going to see at a drag show, I mean, like they have this like performance number to CeCe Peniston's Finally It Happened to Me, like that song from the 90s, and it's so good, but like someone will like turn around and suddenly they have an entire new costume on and entirely new makeup. So it's like, that's not happening. That's not, or somebody will get dragged off stage and then they immediately reappear in a new costume and makeup and all that kind of stuff. So it's just not realistic. It's just not. Holiday Heart with Ving Rhames. I am not as familiar with that one, so I don't know. I'll have to look that up and see how that is. But, and now, see, I've started to touch things, and so I've already got, like, from Dion and I, when we did our Pride Lives, don't forget to check out Dion's channel and look at the Pride Lives that we did. But I used, like, colored leaf, so, like, gold leaf, but in different colors. And I've got little crushed up bits of gold leaf all over my desk. And then I start touching them, and then now they're on my face. And I use this, like, I decided to put this on. I've been trying to use up this REM stuff. This is kind of like a serum. And so I've just been, like, putting it on randomly as, like, because it does have some skincare benefits. Although I do kind of, like, every time I put it on, I turn a little bit red. So I'm like, we might end up decluttering this at some point. And I have two of them because I have this color and then I have this more white with a blue reflect. But I just put some on, but then my face is just a little bit tacky. So if I suddenly start getting glitter all over my face, just know it's because I can't stop touching things in my office. We're all gonna pawn you need gas. Yeah, exactly. I hate this little this blue piece is just like stuck here. I'm trying to get something that, there we go. We'll try to stop. Yeah, so when we look at TOO WONG FOO, and they kind of set up a certain kind of structure as well, right? So we've got these three drag performers, Patrick Swayze, rest in peace, Wesley Snipes, and John Leguizamo. I don't know. I've heard mixed things about John Leguizamo. I've heard that he's like, or at least was for a while. I don't know if he was embarrassed because the 90s were a different time. So after doing a movie like this, I can imagine you get a lot of like backlash or whatever. And so I heard that he was maybe a little bit homophobic because I've heard that like if people asked him about it at like different conventions and things, he would get like upset or like wouldn't talk to people about it or whatever. But then I've also heard that he's done like a lot of other kind of like charity work and stuff. So I should probably deep dive that. I just brought it up because I thought it was interesting because it's very similar to Priscilla, which we'll do second. Priscilla came out first, but we'll talk about TOO WONG FOO, and then we'll talk about the differences. So it's Wesley Snipes, Patrick Swayze, and John Leguizamo, and there's like this pageant. So the only time in the whole film that we see any of these characters out of drag is at the very beginning. So the very beginning of the movie, there's this scene where Patrick Swayze has just gotten out of the shower and he's in a towel and he's like singing a little song or whatever, and then he like hits a tape deck and starts painting his face, and then they show Wesley Snipes painting his face, and they show John Leguizamo getting ready. And so they have this opening montage where it's like that's the only time we see them outside of drag, and then all of a sudden we see this transformation, and we never again through the entire film see them out of drag. There's one moment with a wig rip that we'll talk about in a little bit, but other than that, like they're always fully dressed in drag, and so it's very strange, but we'll get to that when we get to the differences. And so they're getting ready, and there's this pageant hosted by RuPaul, whose drag name is Miss Rachel Tension, and she's wearing a Confederate flag dress. I almost said Union Jack. Why is my brain thinking British right now? It's so strange. It's so strange. And so they have this pageant, and Vida Bohème, Patrick Swayze's character, wins. And so I'm gonna sorry, I'm not gonna pause the chat, but I'm gonna move the chat here so that it'll stay at the spot, because I'm gonna come back to comments, but we're gonna keep it together. And so Patrick Swayze's character wins this pageant and gets this like airline ticket to LA, and then and there's 2 round trip tickets because Noxeema Jackson is Wesley Snipes, is gonna go with her, and then they encounter John Leguizamo, who's crying and is like the newbie, is like the young performer, not very seasoned, needs, like, clearly has talent but needs some help, like shaping and learning and growing and all that kind of stuff. And so they encounter her, and then they go to this restaurant and they encounter Robin Williams, who plays this great character, and they're like, we need to get to LA, but we need to get 3 of us there instead of just 2, so we can give you these airline vouchers or whatever. How can you help us get there? And they end up getting this convertible from a used car lot, and they're going to drive across the country. So that's how we go from New York City, where they start. They need to get to LA for this thing. So as they're driving, they break down in this little town. I don't think they ever say what state it is, but it's clearly meant to be like rural, southern, and it's called Snydersville. And so they go and they break down, and they're waiting for their car to get repaired, and they encounter Stockard Channing and a bunch of other fabulous people. And they find out that there's going to be this festival. There's going to be this strawberry festival. And so the conceit of this, in TOO WONG FOO, there's this conceit that, or at least we think that everyone sees them as women. Everyone encounters them and just believes that they are women, even though they're wearing clearly like big drag. It is a little bit kind of woman's wear, a little bit toned down, but like, they're clearly drag queens, but we're supposed to believe that everybody in this town believes that they are women. And so they go, and so, like I said, we don't ever see them out of drag. So they're driving, and at some point, when the car breaks down, they've stopped at a rest stop because they're driving through the night, and they had this weird encounter with a cop that really unsettled them. And that was one of the times where there was this like threat of violence, and the film does a kind of mixed job with portraying the idea of the threat of violence to people. And so they have this encounter with this cop, Sheriff Dullard. It's Dollard with an O, but everyone calls him Sheriff Dullard. And so they have this encounter, and they go to a rest stop, and they all change, but they change into other drag outfits. And so even while they're traveling, they're always in drag. Like, it's so unrealistic. Like, that, as somebody who has traveled to many out of state, out of town drag shows, we're not just like in drag all the time. And so so they're driving across, and they meet these people. Stockard Channing is kind of the main one, and she kind of bonds with Vida. And then Noxeema meets this older woman. I love the actress. I cannot remember her name, but she and her husband used to run the movie theater, and she's got all these things. And she hasn't spoken in years. And then she ends up talking to Noxeema because they talk about like silent film, black and white film actresses, and they kind of bond over that, and she starts talking again, and they give the whole town a makeover, and it all kind of culminates with the Strawberry Festival. So they help them like infuse some fabulosity into this Strawberry Festival. And then, of course, when the Strawberry Festival is about to show up, Sheriff Dullard shows up, and Vida had left one of her shoes behind, and Stockard Channing's abusive husband is with the sheriff and has like brought him to town. And so he's like, I need the person who fits this shoe. And then somebody comes out wearing this dress that looks like the dress that Vida was wearing. Sorry, we're gonna have spoilers, so if you haven't seen these movies that are 30 years old, I'm so sorry. I know you've been busy for 30 years, but we're gonna ruin them, but watch them anyway. And so this person in this red dress, and it looks like the dress we saw Vida in the last scene inside the house, but then it's Stockard Channing. She's like, that shoe is mine. And then she says, I am a drag queen. And then all of the other people in town are like, I'm a drag queen, I'm a drag queen. And like everybody comes out, and they're all trying to claim the shoe, and they chase off Sheriff Dullard and the abusive ex-husband, and well, still husband, assuming soon to be ex-husband. And then the girls are going to get back in the car, and then that's when Stockard Channing, she's like, Adam's apple. And they're like, what? And she's like, because Vita's about to reveal that she's a drag queen. And so Stockard Channing is like, Adam's apple. women don't have Adam's apple, and I just know that I'm very lucky to have a lady friend who has an Adam's apple. And it's kind of this awkward thing, but it's very sweet. And so they've like bonded, and then they go off to Los Angeles, and part of the like sub story is that John Leguizamo, being the young, inexperienced queen, is trying to earn princess points to become a real queen. She's just a drag princess, and so then as she like does good things, they like give her princess points, and she eventually, and so then when they get to Los Angeles, somehow Chi-Chi wins the pageant, even though she was not in the pageant because she didn't win the pageant in New York. So they were all going together, but Vita was in the pageant. And so Vita and Noxie are both in the pageant, but then so is Chi-Chi, and then she wins. It makes no goddamn sense, but who cares? And the crown is presented by Julie NEWMAR. So the reason why it's called TOO WONG FOO, Thanks for Everything, Julie NEWMAR, is that when they meet at that restaurant with Robin Williams to change out the airplane tickets and find a way to get to Los Angeles together, it's one of those restaurants where they have like famous people, like signed photos of famous people all over the walls, and they see a picture above the booth that's a picture of Julie NEWMAR, and they call her statuesque. And it says TOO WONG FOO, Thanks for Everything, Julie NEWMAR, and they steal it and take it with them on the road. And then that's one of the ways that Vita and Stockard Channing's character bond, is that she says, I always thought she was so statuesque. And she's like, that's what I thought. And so there's all this kind of stuff. And so, yeah, so they're going through, but this whole time they're never out of drag. The only time that there's a whisper of it is there's a scene where Stockard Channing is being abused by her husband, and Vita decides to intervene, and both Noxzema and Chi-Chi try to tell her, don't get involved, this is not your business, or whatever. And they have this fight, and Chi-Chi is like, you only dressed in drag because you couldn't cut it as a man. And then she like steps towards Chi-Chi, and this like thing that they have hanging catches in her wig and rips it off. And so it's like this reveal. And then she puts her wig back on and goes and beats the shit out of Stockard Channing's husband. So it's kind of this weird moment where those are the only times we see them outside of drag. And then it all kind of ends up with, then everybody knows that they're drag queens, but they're okay with it. And we have this big strawberry festival. And then when we get to LA, Chi-Chi has become a drag queen instead of a drag princess, and everything ends happily ever after. And so there's the point of we never see any of the queens out of drag. Also, there's no sense of any family. The only references to family we get are that Vita is not close with her family, that they couldn't accept her when she came out as a drag queen or whatever. And there's a scene where she decides to drive by her parents' house, and they drive by in full drag, of course. And so they park outside, and this woman comes out and looks and then kind of shakes her head and then goes back in the house and shuts the door. And then Vita like throws away the map and then just like takes off. And that's how they end up in Snydersville, is because Vita threw the map away because she was mad about the whole family thing. But other than that, we don't get any sense of any sort of like family relationships, certainly no romantic relationships. They were not willing to do any of that. So that's kind of where we're starting with TOO WONG FOO. So before we move to Priscilla, let me start looking at comments, and we'll go through those. Maybe that's why he's in that little clown demon in Spawn to throw. Oh, John Leguizamo, yeah. Leguizamo's character, Chichi Rodriguez, that guy is a real-life athlete, and it was the real Chichi who was embarrassed at him. Interesting. I didn't know that Chichi Rodriguez was based on a real person. Interesting. The character name was from a real person. Paul, Birdcage. No, we'll talk a little bit about Birdcage, but we are talking about TOO WONG FOO and Priscilla right now. So hello, Paul. Hello, Nick. WTF. That's the like thing now. I don't know. People like to just scroll through lives and then just say WTF. What the fuck is it? We're talking about queer movies because it's Pride. So welcome. Hello, Paul. Hi. This is Patrick Swayze and the Wesley Snipes director. Yes, absolutely. Somebody left a shoe like Cinderella. Yes, that was Patrick Swayze's character, left a shoe like Cinderella. Paul saying hello. People are saying hello to Paul. Yes, we're very friendly. Lots of highs. Fabulosity, yes. But didn't they want to live their lives as women, which is why they were always dressed? No, so that's the thing, is they are very much like, we are drag queens, and it was never presented as that they were trans in any way, because we have the opening scene that sets them up as men, because we see them as men getting dressed and getting ready for the festivities and all of that kind of thing. So it's not presented as they're like And they always are very clear about the language of "we are drag queens." And I don't know if the people who like wrote it maybe didn't know the distinctions and the differences, or just didn't want to engage with any idea of trans identity or anything like that. But yeah, so it's never explained why they're always in drag, except that it's visually, it's the gag, right? That's what they're trying to do. When everyone stands up and says, "I'm gay." Yes, like in In-N-Out, when everyone's like, "I'm gay, I'm gay." Yeah, it's very much like that. The buzzing is, so I remembered to turn off the sound, but somebody was calling me. So I've been getting, I don't know what's going on, but I'm getting way more. I don't know if I clicked on something that I shouldn't have, but I have been getting like more spam calls than usual. What's the buzzing? Phone vibrating. I can't stay for this. Well, okay, bye, Jules. Like, it's free content on the internet. I don't know how to help you. It's done now. So, people have a lot of opinions about free content on the internet. I don't know what it is. I don't know. If you can't stay, then don't stay. This is not an airport, my friends. You do not have to announce your departure. And most of the good trolls, the good champagne dreamers that are here, don't mind if there's a little bit of buzzing. I'll try to remember, if I do get another call, I'll try to remember to silence it for Jules and her very delicate sensibilities. But Chi-Chi was flirtatious with one of the town boys who didn't realize he was a man. Yes, so there is some of that's kind of, that's another thing with like the threat of violence, is that like Chi-Chi is very flirtatious with one of the boys, and with all of the boys, but she especially likes this one boy, because there's Bobby Ray and then a girl, Bobby Lee, and Bobby Lee likes Bobby Ray and Chi-Chi likes Bobby Ray, and so then she's kind of flirting, and then these 4 boys from the town like corner Chi-Chi, and it's like, again, it's this weird like threat of violence, and then all of a sudden Bobby Ray shows up in a pickup truck and she hops in and he like saves her, and they're gonna maybe like have a little date, and then he shows up and they're talking and he's saying like, "We could never have any secrets." It's like, not even one little secret, and so she's like, not even like one little secret wouldn't be okay. And he's like, "No, not ever." So then she tells him like, "We're not meant to be," and says, "Bobby Lee, you can have him," and that's how she earns one of her princess points or whatever. And but it does kind of play with that weird, there's that weird, very transphobic trope of like, trans people are out to trick straight men into having sex with them, and then so it does play with some ugly sort of tropes. It's not very explicitly saying that that's what they think or that they're endorsing that or whatever, but they do use that for some of the humor, so it's a little bit and there is some violence in Priscilla that we're going to talk about in a second. I'll make sure to show replay to Ms. Rainbow Rose tomorrow. She was given Ziggy Marley tickets for her birthday. Oh, I love that. But these are 2 of Rose's absolutely favorite movies. I love that. Yes, Priscilla. I do like Priscilla better. I think they're both good, but I think that, especially once you compare them, once you see both of them and compare them, Priscilla is just a better movie. Like, it just is. And so that's kind of what's going on with TOO WONG FOO. Now let's talk about Priscilla, because Priscilla, again, has a very different kind of perspective. And so what it is it's these 2 drag performers who are in Sydney. Hello, Dawn. How's it going? Hey, Dion. How's it going? Welcome. Let's see. Let me go ahead and I'm going to pause the chat again as we get into Priscilla. So let's talk about Priscilla and some of the differences. So it starts in Sydney at this gay bar, and 2 of the performers, who one of them, I always forget his name, but he was Agent Smith in the Matrix movies. He's kind of the lead character. He's the Patrick Swayze. There's a younger performer who is more tied to the show, and that is Guy Pearce, who's very hot, and is kind of a little bit of eye candy in that movie. But he's kind of the young, impulsive Chichi Rodriguez of the group. And then there's Terrence Stamp, who plays kind of the Noxzema Jackson, is an older performer. So when it starts, anybody know who Agent Smith was? I can't, and now I've paused the chat, so I can't even. Priscilla has better dramatic dialogue, absolutely. Everyone's saying hello. Did I see the movie of Stockard Channing and Lucy Liu? I think I have. If These Walls Could Talk, I think. Everybody's saying hello. I'm still at this meeting. I hope to be home in an hour or so. It was more commercial and had big stars, and Patrick was a big, gorgeous woman. Hello, hello. Everybody's saying hello. Gotta go for now. What is the name of the movie? It sounds intense. Shame on you. Shame on Priscilla was my best friend's favorite. I think I've missed something. Hugo Weaving, thank you. Thank you. That's why I was like, I know I said I wasn't gonna like, I'm trying to like stay on track because I'm very squirrel. I'm trying to like stay on track, and so I kind of will like scroll the chat down a little bit so that it starts to build up, and then I can go back to it later. But I was like, I'm gonna ask a question, so I should probably check the chat. Hugo Weaving. So Hugo Weaving is kind of the main character, and it opens with this fabulous drag show where Hugo Weaving is doing I've Been to Paradise but I've Never Been to Me, which is this old like disco era song, and in this like sequin gown, and it's very cheesy or whatever, and like someone throws a beer can at him as he's leaving the stage or whatever, and so it's kind of showing like, oh, our community isn't appreciating us, like we need a break, people are being, which facts, accurate, relatable content that sometimes drag queens get not a lot of appreciation for the work we do. That's a rant for another day. But so they decide, so then all of a sudden Hugo Weaving gets a call from somebody, and we don't really know why, but then he kind of pitches to this younger performer, Adam. He's like, do you want to go? So Hugo Weaving's character's name is Tick. And then Adam is the younger one, the John Leguizamo Chi-Chi type character who is with the show and is like, do you want to go to Alice Springs, which I guess is like you have to drive through the outback. It's kind of this rural place. And he's like, I know somebody who owns a resort hotel and they want us to come for a booking. And so they're going to go on this whole thing. And then they're like, well, is it just us? And they said, well, no, I'm going to call Bernadette. So Bernadette is someone who had been in this kind of like drag burlesque kind of show called Les Girls, where it was all cross-dress drag queen kind of performers. But Bernadette is trans, and so she has transitioned, and so she lives her life full-time as Bernadette. And that's one of the things where they do kind of play with, again, this was the 90s, and so one of the things is that Adam and Bernadette don't get along, and so Adam keeps dead naming her and using her former name, and that's kind of like a big point through this whole thing, is they're always fighting or whatever. And Bernadette is a character who really kind of shows that she has strength because she's had to develop strength. So like they go to this little town and they go to have a drink at the bar, and this little like little squat froggy woman in a white tank top shows up and is like, you can't have nothing, we don't serve your kind around here. And Bernadette like reads her down, and then they have a drinking contest and Bernadette wins, and so then everybody like parties together, and it seems like everything is going well, right? So they're driving across the outback and they stop in this little town, everybody's partying. When they come back out, see, this is why I can't let myself get distracted, because they're driving across in a bus, because Adam somehow finagles money out of his mother to buy this old like Swedish tourist bus to drive across the outback. And so they have this old jinkety bus, and they decorate it and make it very draggy, and so they kind of are driving across the outback. So when they come out the next morning, the bus has been painted, and it says, of course it was the 90s, so it says die AIDS faggots, I think is what it says on it. And so they're very much trying to like, it kind of gives this juxtaposition of, at the bar there was this threat of violence, and Bernadette sort of stands up to it and responds to it, and it seems like everything is okay, but people still like paint the bus, and still, so even when things seem like they're going well, there's a lot of like this undercurrent of threats of violence. And so then they're going, and eventually the bus breaks down, and so then they're waiting, and they're doing all these like elaborate, in the outback, in like the desert areas of the outback, they're doing these like elaborate performances where like Adam will be, they have this silver high-heeled shoe prop set piece that's just like strapped to the top of the bus. So sometimes they'll be driving and Adam is up there like on the shoe with like billowing fabric behind him doing this like opera number. It's very strange, but And so as we're going, then the bus breaks down, and they end up in this little town called Coober Pedy. Or maybe that's the second town. It doesn't really matter. But they end up in this one town, and they meet this mechanic named Bob. And Bob has this wife who's kind of, again, not everything is perfect in this. There's some things that were maybe less frowned upon at the time, but Bob has like a mail order bride, and they fight all the time. And he keeps referencing that he finds out that they do a show, and he used to go to lay girls shows, and he really liked them. He's like, you should do a show at the pub. And they're like, here? Like, you think we should? He's like, I think it would be great. And then they're like, oh, is your wife going to come? And they're like, no, she's not allowed at the bar anymore, or whatever. It's like a whole thing. And so they go and do this show at the small town bar, and people don't know what to do with them. And they're in these weird, like, almost clown outfits with these, like, Cabbage Patch doll wigs with, like, pigtails, and they can pull the pigtails off, and, like, so it's a whole thing, and everybody's just, like, staring at them and doesn't know what to do. And all of a sudden, Bob's wife, Cynthia, it showed her earlier where there was a locked cabinet, and she opened it, and all of these, like, ping pong balls fell out, and then, like, a zebra thong, and it's like, what? So all of a sudden she comes in, and she's in this zebra lingerie thing, and they start playing this, like, stripper music, and she gets up on the bar, and then she's holding a ping pong ball, and she, like, is winking, she, like, bends over and is looking at the drag performers and, like, winks at them. And then all of a sudden it, like, pans out a little bit, and all of a sudden ping pong balls start shooting out at the audience. It's so ridiculous and so wild. But so then the next morning after the debacle at the bar, Cynthia decides to leave. And so then Bob has kind of fixed up the bus, and he's like, well, you're going to have trouble. Like, it's a temporary fix, but there's something that needs to be replaced. And so then Cynthia has left him. And so they drive like 10 feet, and then they're like, Bob, fancy ride to Coober Pedy? Yeah, because that's the next town is Coober Pedy. And so then he's like, yeah, I'll go along for the ride or whatever. And so then they go to Coober Pedy, which is this mining town. And so in the mining town, like, Bob knows some people, so he goes off to, like, hang out with the friends or whatever. And everybody else is trying to, like, just exist or whatever. And again, now we have a scene with this threat of violence, but it's much more real. In Priscilla, the stakes are much more real and the resolutions are much more real. And so Adam, the young one, gets dressed up, takes a bunch of drugs, and then goes to the local video store and asks if he can rent the Texas Chainsaw Mascara, and the person doesn't know what to do. And then he finds this, like, drinking party where Bob is hanging out, and then there's this kind of lead alpha guy, like, clearly an asshole, and he starts kind of flirting with him, and he's like, where does a girl get a drink around here? And he's like, it's a beer or nothing. And so he gives her a beer, and then she, like, toasts, and he sees the hair on her arm. And so then he, like, smacks it out of her hand, and then he, like, chases her, and she gets cornered in the spot, and he, like, hits her, and hits her against the wall. And then Bernadette comes, and it's got this great moment that I love. I mean, the scene of violence is very, like, again, the stakes are very real, and it's very scary. But then Bernadette shows up, and then he's playing with this idea of, like, oh, people are trying to trick me and all this kind of stuff. And then Bernadette comes around, and of course she's always dressed up. She's always dressed up as herself. But again, this asshole can't understand the difference between Adam in drag and Bernadette just as a woman. And so he's like, oh, are you here to fuck me, Bernadette? He starts grabbing his crotch, and he's like, why don't you fuck me, Bernadette? Why don't you fuck me? And then she just very calmly walks up to him and, like, knees him super hard in the crotch. And she's like, there, now you're fucked. And then they, like, leave or whatever. And so then Bob is like, well, I can't show my face in Coober Pedy for a while. So he decides to go along with them. And he and Bernadette start kind of developing maybe a little bit of a friendship that's very sweet. And so then they go, and when they get to this resort hotel, we find out that the woman who runs the resort hotel is Tick's ex-wife. Oh, these lights are being so weird. So the light just shut off. Hold on. I know I get distracted so easily, but let me see if I can. Sometimes if I can turn them on and turn them down a couple ticks. I guess we're just out one light. Good thing it's not a makeup video. The equipment that I buy is so janky. But so we find out that this is Tick's ex-wife, and that he has a child who's maybe like 9 or 10. And so we find out that the reason why is because his ex-wife wants some time to herself. She wants Tick to take their son back to Sydney. And so that's why she invited them. She does book them, and they do a show. And that's the show that I said is not realistic in how it portrays drag costume changes and shit. But so he's going to take the son back with him, and he's embarrassed to tell the kid that he's a drag performer. And the mother is like, just be honest, like the way, because he's all nervous about being a good dad and all this kind of stuff, and he doesn't want the kid to find out he does drag because he's a little bit ashamed of it or whatever. And then eventually she's like, just be honest with him. Like, the kid will figure it out or he won't. Like, all you can do is be honest with him, and then let things kind of figure themselves out. He's a smart kid. He'll figure it out. He's compassionate. He's a good person. You know, he'll be fine or whatever. And so, and this is one of the key ways that this movie is very different, is because, number one, all of the there's no sense in TOO WONG FOO that anybody, there's no mention of boyfriends or relationships, or there's not really any, like, certainly no people, nobody is shown that would be like a partner or even an ex-partner. In this one, all of the characters have, you know, a sexual identity and sexual experiences. And, you know, when we open, Bernadette decides to go on the trip because she was married to a man and he just died. And so Tick goes and meets her at the funeral and is like, come with us, it'll be a good getaway or whatever. And then Adam is very much the Twinkie, twunk, I guess we would say nowadays, but very much the like young, gay, very openly sexual, flirty kind of person. And then Tick, they're like, so are you gay? Are you straight? And he's like, maybe bisexual. And so his identity is very much in flux, and he's trying to figure it out. And so at one point his son asked him, like, will you have a boyfriend when we get back to Sydney? And he says, maybe. Would that be okay with you? And so, like, they have real conversations about relationships, and there's family. He's got his ex-wife and his son, and, you know, we find out more about Adam and his family, and, you know, we get a sense that these characters are real people who live in real family relationships, unlike TOO WONG FOO, where they're just kind of these characters. They're almost like set pieces. And so, you know, we get this whole thing, and we get, you know, they're not just drag performers. We also see the difference between the two who are drag performers, but that's something that they do. It's something, you know, whatever, if they enjoy it or they, you know, whatever, it's not their entire life. Whereas with Bernadette, she is a drag performer, but is also a trans woman. And so she has this character that she puts on, but when she's not in drag, she is a woman. And so it shows different gender identities. It shows different sexuality. And the way that they talk about it is much more nuanced and much more useful and much more realistic to real life. And so then and then eventually, like, they decide to go back to Sydney, and then Bob and Bernadette decide to stay back at the resort. Since his ex-wife is going on a vacation, she gets Bernadette to handle the entertainment while she's away, and she and Bob are going to stay there together because they have this budding romance. And then they take off in the bus and they go back to Sydney, and all is right with the world. So it's two movies that have, if you look at just the bare bones of what the story is, it's telling the same kind of story, but it does it very, very differently. So let's go ahead. Let me take a drink, and then I'll get back into these comments. Let's see if we've had any bad trolls show up while I've been. Priscilla was my best friend's favorite. I love that. People are saying hello. Hugo Weaving. My phone will probably ring because someone has gossip. Oh no! I love that song. Which one, CeCe Peniston or the I've Been to Paradise, but I've never been to Meet? Both of them. Priscilla has a great soundtrack, but people are saying hello, hello. I have straight up had a few relatives who told me that they would not use the name that found me and would keep dead naming me. That is so freaking hurtful. And that scene hits kind of, yeah. And that's something that I think people didn't have as much of an awareness of in the 90s, and of how hurtful that was. I mean, it should be obvious. Like, it's one of those things that there's all these things that used to be, not that they were okay, but we didn't talk about them. We didn't really engage with them as much. That should have clearly been, and I think one of the things, so Caitlyn Jenner, I think that she has given us a great gift. And I think the great gift that Caitlyn Jenner has given us is a perfect reminder that just because somebody is from a marginalized community doesn't mean that they are a good person. Because Caitlyn Jenner is a terrible person. She is a terrible person. But it's a good sort of like example case to then talk about the fact that just because Caitlyn Jenner, excuse me, pretty girl, is an absolutely terrible, horrendous, heinous person, does not mean that it's okay to misgender her, does not mean that it's okay to dead name her, does not mean that it's okay to disrespect her based on her gender identity. There's so many other reasons to disrespect her, because she's a rich, white cunt. Like, there's so many other reasons to disrespect Caitlyn Jenner. You don't have to misgender her, you don't have to dead name her, you don't have to use the wrong pronouns. That's low-hanging fruit. That is beneath us. She has given us multitudes of reasons. I mean, just the vehicular-based jokes alone, you don't have to. So I think that that's what she's given us. I think that that's the gift that Caitlyn Jenner has given us. And I think that there's some of that when I go back to Priscilla, there's a little bit, because they love to call Bernadette Ralph. And of course, obviously they picked that name because it's so like, Bernadette is like this elegant woman, and so then they'd be like, Ralph. And so that joke has not aged very well, but absolutely, yeah, it's one of those things. It's not boys or girls. Well, both and more, Jose. There's boys and girls and theys and thems, and sometimes we dress like the other. There's a lot of fluidity here. Funny how people that should support you and don't. Exactly. The whole thing about chosen families is that sometimes just because your real family doesn't mean it works out. And so we choose. Yes, Dawn, chosen family. Absolutely. Hello, Leia. Nice to see you again. Hello. People are saying hello. Yes, absolutely, Dawn, the chosen family. Hello. Texas Chainsaw Mascara. I forgot about that. Yeah, I like that one. I've always wanted to make like a cheesy indie horror movie, the Texas Chainsaw Mascara. But yeah, so Priscilla just does it with so much more nuance, and it's so much more real. The scenes where there's threats of violence are very real and really make you feel the stakes. In TOO WONG FOO, there are these moments where there's a threat of violence, like when Sheriff Dullard is basically molesting Vita. Like, that's how he finds out that they're drag queens, is that he reaches up her skirt. And as a drag queen, I can tell you, people seem to think that you are community property, and they think that they can grab and touch and feel all over your body. They do not. The no square is not in their reference or whatever. I've had to get now, of course, a lot of drag queens, I wear so much padding that like they couldn't, the whole idea of like reaching up a skirt and feeling anything, forget about it. I've got 4 layers of tights. I've got 3 body shapers that have like crotch pieces in them, so like you're not gonna feel anything but spandex. But the point remains, you shouldn't just grab people's crotches. That's not okay. You shouldn't grab. So let's have a little aside, as we're talking about this, a little funny story from when I would go to horror conventions. One of the horror conventions that I went to in Indianapolis. So I used to go to this one called Days of the Dead, and I would try to go to 2 a year, and they were housed kind of out of Indianapolis. So I would try to go to Indianapolis and then one other location. So I went to Atlanta a couple times. I went to Charlotte, and then the pandemic happened and I stopped going places. But I was in Indianapolis, and Russ Marquand was there, and I was excited because there were supposed to be 4 people from The Walking Dead there. 2 of them had to cancel. I was very sad because one of them played like one of the lesbian characters, and so I was very excited to meet her, but she had to cancel because they had to do reshoots or whatever. But the guy who played Pastor Gabriel was there, and he was nice enough. He was a little bit standoffish. Other people didn't have that experience, so I don't know if he was maybe a little bit homophobic, but he didn't say anything. He was nice enough when I was there. It was fine. But he was a little bit more standoffish. But Ross Marquand is so friendly and so nice or whatever. And I took a photo with him. And it's so funny because we had to take the photo twice. And I knew the guy that used to run the photos for them. And so he printed out both versions because I at cons, they just want you to be in and out, right? Like, they don't want you to try to have your moment to like talk or whatever. So there's usually like a little greeting, like, hey, how you doing? You figure out how you want to stand, you take the picture. I was a pro by that point. This was like year 3 of me going to conventions. And so I was there, and I would always buy the VIP ticket, because then the VIP people got to be first in the line. So then I could go in, I could take my photo and get back to the convention stuff or whatever. And so I'm there, and I'm the first one in, and he's like coming in, and I'm just so used to it that I just was there, and I had my little purse or whatever, and I just hit my pose. I like did my little whatever, arm on the shoulder, hit my pose, and he's like not even ready. And the guy just was so used to me coming in being ready that he just took the picture. And then he's like, oh, Bill, how did that look? And he's like, no, you got to take another one. And so Ross is just like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I'm sorry I wasn't ready. And so then he like gets ready, and we take another picture. He's like, make sure you come by the booth and show me the 2 pictures. And he's like, I'll sign it for you or whatever. And so I was like, yeah, I'll go and show him. I think that's funny. And so they printed out both pictures for me. And so I went to his booth or whatever, and I'm just like, and I showed him the pictures, and we were talking a little bit, and he was very friendly and was like asking me about like, what is it like being in North Dakota, like as a big old drag queen, like what is that like for you? And we kind of were chatting a little bit, and I knew these 2 vendors. There was a vendor that would come to all the Indianapolis shows, and it was this somewhat older couple, like in their late 50s, and I bought some jewelry from her one time, and we had just been visiting because this was like the 3rd year I had been there, and so we were very friendly or whatever. And we walked by, and he like goosed me a little bit, and again, I'm wearing so many layers of things, I barely even noticed, but I just like they just kind of, he like goosed me, and then he's like, oh, how are you doing or whatever, and I'm like, oh, good, just getting my photo signed or whatever. And I was like, I'll come visit you in the vendor room later. And he's like, yeah, good. And Lisa and his wife Lisa's like, hey, hello. And I'm like, hey guys. And then they just kind of went on their way. And Ross Marquand, I turned back, and he's got this very serious look, and he's like, are you okay? And I was like, it didn't even register for me. So I was like, oh yeah, because this was Sunday, so this was like the last day of the con. So I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, do I look rough? Like, do I look rough like I've had a night of partying? Because I had. And so I was like, oh yeah, I'm fine. I was like, it's Sunday, I get a little tired, but you know what? I was like, the day ends early, I'll get to change out of this before too long. And he's like, no, because I noticed that. And he's like trying to be delicate about how he says it. And he's like, I saw that man touch you, and I didn't. And I was like, oh no. I was like, I know them. I was like, that's a little joke. We're always very flirty back and forth with us. So he's like, oh, I just wanted to make sure. So he was so sweet because, and I don't even think about it sometimes. Like, I didn't even think about it when it happened. Like, I didn't know them that well. Like, I'd only known them from this convention or whatever. But I'm so used to people just treating drag queens like community property that can be manhandled and groped and all this kind of stuff. And so I was like, oh yeah. And he was just so sweet about it, and I just was like dense and was just like, oh yeah, I'm tired, but it's, you know, it's the last day. Today's the day where we kind of fun, you know, it's just kind of low key or what. And he's like, no, I saw that man like touched you, and I just wanted to make sure you were okay. And I was like, that's so sweet. And I'm just so used to being manhandled that I didn't even notice. Like, I didn't. And it's somebody that I didn't mind, because again, like, we're kind of friendly or whatever, and so it didn't even occur, like, even for me, like, it didn't occur to me that, like, oh, that's probably not okay. I've never cared if people like pinch my butt or whatever. I'm like, it's the people who come up and try to like grab your crotch, that's where I'm like, these hands are rated E for everyone, so you should think real careful before you start putting that hand somewhere in the no-no square. Like, don't do it. Yeah, he's such a nice guy. He was really lovely. So those are kind of the 2 main drag queen movies. And that's kind of why, like, again, so many people have seen TOO WONG FOO but haven't seen Priscilla. A lot of people haven't seen either of them. Now they're getting to be, you know, about 30 years old. So they've kind of fallen a little bit out of the zeitgeist, but like I said, I think they're both on Tubi for free. If you Google where they're streaming, I think they might be available in other places as well, but I think they're on Tubi. Another thing that's on Tubi that I decided to rewatch for Pride, I've been rewatching a lot of things about queer media because we've been having these discussions. Excuse me, pretty girl. So I rewatched the Celluloid Closet. So the Celluloid Closet is kind of a history of queerness in film. Now, it was based on a book by Vito Russo that he passed away in 1990. and I think there were updated books. I don't know who updated the edition, but I think like early 90s there was an update to this, but he published it in like I think the late 80s, and they made a documentary out of it, and the documentary is from like the mid 90s, and there's a lot of really interesting kind of history. So there is some that kind of touches on the horror that we talked about earlier in the month, but also a lot of other things like the sissy trope, and then the sort of like tragic homosexual. If you know the movie or the play The Children's Hour, which is about two women who are school teachers at this private school, and this bratty student who got in trouble and wants to like punish the headmistresses, she starts a rumor that they're lesbians. And then one of them, who's played by Shirley MacLaine in the movie version, she comes to realize that she is a lesbian and that she is in love with the other one. And at the end, she hangs herself. Like there was absolutely having to like, if you were gay, you had to die. There was a long time where that was sort of the narrative, was that queerness could exist in movies if it was sort of tinged with evil and if the character died. Those were kind of the two main prerequisites. So there's a lot of like thrillers that have very queer coded villains, and they could be sort of like deliciously queer, but then they also had to die. Like that was the penance or the payment for that. And so you get some really interesting portrayals because they allowed it if there was that consequence. Strongly recommend the Sam Sachs poem After My Boyfriend's Drag Show. It shattered me and helped me finally come out. I will have to look for that. That sounds very interesting. Thank you for that recommendation, CJ. So the Lavender Closet, no, the Celluloid Closet. There's another one. I was trying to find that one, and I should have Googled before this, but today was a busy day. We had a lot going on today. It was a good day, but we had a lot going on today. So I didn't have time to Google it. But there's another documentary about queer history and film that's Lavender something. But the Celluloid Closet. Now, it does end on this very sort of upbeat note because it ends in the mid-90s when things are starting to like turn around a little bit. I would be very interested to see a sequel, somebody do like from the mid-90s to now, to kind of talk about how queerness has changed in cinema. I also watched Disclosure, which is, it's on Netflix. I don't know if it's a Netflix documentary. It might be one that they produce themselves, but that is about trans representation in film. It's hosted by Laverne Cox, and it's a very good kind of overview of the history of trans portrayals. Celluloid Closet does touch on some trans representation in film, but it's much more focused on sexuality and gay and lesbian representations. It was written by a white gay man, so it's not entirely surprising that there might be some blind spots in like his perspective and his vision, but so it's good, but there are definitely blind spots, and Disclosure is one of the films that helps to kind of fill some of that in. Another documentary that I really love is from 1968, and it's The Queen. And The Queen is fascinating because it actually kind of goes behind the scenes at this drag pageant in 1960. Well, it came out in 1968, so probably 67, 66. I don't know how long it took to produce or whatever. But so this like mid 60s drag pageant. And that was a time where a lot of drag performers, there weren't a lot of drag shows in the same way that there are now. Or, you know, there was more underground kind of stuff. And there was like, we'll talk about what John Waters was doing, but there was a lot of these like pageants and like trying to look very real, trying to present the sort of realness. And so it was sort of like a white version of like ball culture where they have like different categories, and you do the pageanty thing where you do an evening gown and maybe you do like sportswear or cocktail attire. It was very pageanty. It was very, but this one is very, very prissy. And so then this young queen wins, and then so there's this great scene with the mother of the House of LaBeija. So then if you watch Paris is Burning, which is from 1990 or 95, with Paris is Burning, they go into drag ball culture, so ball culture in New York, and the House of LaBeija is very prominently featured in Paris is Burning. Well, the mother, Crystal LaBeija, is actually part of this The Queen documentary, and when she doesn't win, she reads them to filth, and this poor like 20-something kid in like a questionable wig who just won this like pageant is just like standing there like awkwardly, and Crystal is just like going on and on about how this is terrible and this was rigged and all, which let me tell you, if I had a nickel for every time I heard a drag performer complain about how a pageant of any size or caliber was rigged, I'd buy myself a shiny new wig because that I have a whole history with pageants. That could be a chatty live some other time where I just talk about. I have done a pageant. I did 2 pageants. The bar that I used to host and be the show director, the I-Beam in Moorhead, which is no longer around, but we used to have the Miss and Mr. Moorhead because it was in Moorhead, Minnesota, but you couldn't do Miss Moorhead because that was part of the U.S. Trumpy Miss USA organization. So if you're going to do anything that was just like the Miss in the town, you had to go through that. And they didn't want to pay any licensing to any of the like Miss Gay of America or whatever. And so then they just did Miss Moorhead. And so I was Miss Moorhead 2004. So I did win. I competed in 2 pageants. And I won one, and that's how I got more involved with them and became their MC and eventually their show director, is because I was Miss Moorhead for 2004. And so I did do a pageant. Somewhere I've got a big, obnoxious, tall crown. The guys who ran the bar, I love them, and one of them has since passed, but Kurt, who is the one who has passed, and he was one of the bar owners, he hated spending any money at all if he could help it. He just absolutely abhorred spending money. And so the crown for Miss Moorhead traveled. So like you didn't even get to keep it. It like went to the next year's winner. You had to bring it back. And so I was like, fuck this. You also got some prize money. And so I was like, I am going to buy myself a crown. So somewhere I have a big crown that I bought through ronsrhinestones.com, which is also no longer around when you've been doing this as long as I have. Things and people and places disappear, and it's very sad. So Ron's Rhinestones. So somewhere I have my crown that I bought for myself, because I think I got $1,000 for that pageant. And so I was like, I'm going to spend $300 to get a crown so that I can just have my crown. And then I wore the like official crown during my year. And then after that, anytime I wanted to wear it. Was he the guy who had the weird story? Yes, it was Kurt Kiefer, who had up here. It was called Treasure Hunters, and he had one in Fargo that was called Kiefer's, because he just bought like wholesale lots of things that like didn't sell. So it was kind of like a dollar store, but it was so random you didn't know what you were going to find, and it was all like on pallets, and you would just have to go and dig through boxes and see what was there. And it was so strange. And so like anytime we did any kind of like game show kind of stuff, he would just find the stuff that wasn't selling at Treasure Hunters and like bring it down that we could give away as prizes. So anytime we had prizes for anything, we always said that you could win prizes that were fabulous or just less, and they were usually less. Yeah, Kurt. Oh, what a sweet man. But yeah, hated to spend a dime. Hated to spend a dime. Did not want to run a bar. That was the idea of his partner, Mark. Mark, who I adored, was very sweet, but also a little bit fiery, and was a little bit of like the kind of toddler energy of like, today I want to be a fireman. Tomorrow I want to be an astronaut. And like one day he was like, I want to own a bar. And then he owned a bar and he kind of hated it. And so, yeah, it was just, they were a fun couple. They were a fun couple, but yeah, those were the days. That's back down memory lane a little bit. So The Queen is a great documentary that talks about that. And that shows you a lot of what a lot of the drag scene was like in the late 60s for a lot of people. Again, there's always underground things. There's always different places that are doing different things. But this was, around the New York area, this was a lot of what was going on where these, excuse me, pretty girl, where a lot of these like pageanty type things. And then of course, Paris is Burning shows how the ballroom for black and brown performers primarily, that this was a separate sort of place where they could showcase their skills and they could be featured, and it could be more of their culture without this kind of white trying to fit in and trying to be very traditional womanhood kind of centered. But you get this crossover because there are, I think Crystal, by the time Jenny Livingston was filming Paris is Burning, I believe Crystal LaBeija, because she's not featured, and I believe she had already passed away, but her drag daughter, Pepper LaBeija, is that her name? But she's one of the main people who's featured, is the daughter of Crystal LaBeija, who's in The Queen, and showing up. And Dorian Corey is there. So if you haven't seen Paris is Burning, all about the ballroom culture, you should watch it and pay special attention, because Dorian Corey is in it, and she's kind of this like grand matriarch. She's clearly one of the like older performers that's there. She's like a performer who's had her big heyday and is maybe a little bit in decline. Hashtag relatable content. But like through most of the show, she's like painting a face. And so through the whole thing, she's painting a face. And there's one point where she's like doing eyeliner, and she's getting it, and she's like, and she's trying to talk while she's doing it, but also be very, and she's like, if you shoot an arrow and it goes real high, well, good for you. It's so funny. And she's the one who kind of breaks down reading versus shade and what the difference is and all this kind of stuff. It's so good. And if you watch that, watch it and pay special attention to Dorian Corey, and then Google the story about how when Dorian Corey died, they found a mummified corpse in her closet that had been there for decades. And nobody knew who it was, and she had never said anything to anyone, as far as we know. And so nobody knew who it was. They think they've identified him, like, through some of the investigation and stuff, but, and there was some different evidence. There was, like, beer can, like, the little pop, whatever this is called, on, like, a can. There were some from, like, a certain kind of beer. It was a very distinctive. There were some of those that were in the bag with the corpse. And so they think they can, and they think they've tracked it down to like what time period it was, and they thought it was like in the 70s. Is it just a tab? Yeah, I know that should have been easier. In decline. And so they think they figured, and they traced it back, like using that as like evidence. They think that it was like sometime around like 1976 or something. So like when they're filming Paris is Burning, they're in her apartment. That dead body was like feet away from them while they're filming. Dorian Corey just getting ready, like she'd been doing for 2 decades, since this person somehow died and ended up being hidden in her closet, and because of the way that he was put in there, ended up being like fully mummified. And it's a crazy story. I wish someone would do a documentary about that story. I wish that somebody would like do a documentary about the body in Dorian Corey's closet, because I'm fascinated. There are some things that just like once you hear it, you can never unhear it. So like Dorian Corey and the body in her closet, that woman from Australia who poisoned her in-laws and wanted to poison her husband, but he didn't show up to lunch with the death cap mushrooms. Do you know that case? That's from just like a couple years ago. That Colleen Ballinger, the toxic gossip train, all aboard. Like that. There are moments that someday, hello, Fabulous Joe, welcome. Someday I'm going to do a video all about the pop culture moments that just like stick in my head for free and that I cannot stop thinking about. Because that all aboard, Colleen Ballinger, that's probably number 1. And I haven't checked for a little while, but I think that's still on YouTube. It's still on YouTube. What? How? Yes, the poison mushroom lady. Fascinated. I was fascinated by that. Yeah. And the only reason that they really kind of figured it out is that like one of the people didn't die. And so she had tried to poison them, and then the person, and she was like a random forager, so she like should have known about different, because she tried to pretend like, oh, I bought the mushrooms at this store and they said they were this kind of mushroom, so how would I know? And she like, but she was very cagey because she ate lunch with them, but then like didn't eat the mushrooms, or didn't eat and knew how to eat like less of the mushrooms, so she only got a little bit sick. And like her husband was supposed to be there, so as her husband, it was going to be, and she and her husband were estranged. No shit. Were estranged, and so they were supposed to have lunch to talk about, I think, the divorce. But it was supposed to be him and his mom and dad, and then I think his aunt and uncle. And I think she killed 3 people, because I think that the dad decided not to go, the husband decided not to go, and then the mom and dad and the aunt and uncle, and I think the uncle survived. I think the mom and the dad and the aunt all died. Crazy. I need to look into that again. And then at first they were like, it took them the longest time to make an arrest, where it was so obvious that this like mushroom foraging woman killed them, and like claimed that she bought them at this market, but then there was no packaging. She couldn't say where she bought them. She was just like at a stall at the market, and they're like, do you have a receipt? Do you have? No, I don't have anything. And like, it took them ages. They're like, we're still investigating if there's foul play involved. And I'm like, what? Where do we live? You just had 4 people who were poisoned with mushrooms, and you don't know that there's foul play involved? But like the person who prepared the dinner didn't get sick? Like, what is happening in your world? Like, what? And you know that there's like this contentious divorce, and it was so bad that like the husband wouldn't even, decided not even to show up to lunch because he didn't want to have like a weird fight or whatever. And she like, her kids were supposed to come to lunch, and I think she was the one who like convinced the kids not to come. She's like, oh, I'll save them, so they don't really like mushrooms, because she made a beef Wellington with mushrooms. And she's like, well, and so she's like, well, I'll save some for the kids or whatever. She's like, they pick out the mushrooms anyway. And I was like, oh my God, it's insane. It's crazy. It's crazy. So that's one of those moments. I mean, I'm kind of giving you the video right here where I'm telling you all the moments, but we could have some time to really talk through it. Eileen Davidson, there's a couple like Real Housewives moments. Now, Teresa Giudice from the first season of New Jersey is like low-hanging fruit, where she's like, engaged 19 times, you prostitution whore, and she flips the table. And that was such a big deal, but there are other ones that are so much better. It's such a little moment, but it just makes me laugh, is anytime I see the one from Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, Kyle Richards, her blonde sister, I don't know her name, and I don't care to know her name. I don't think I ever watched any of the Beverly Hills, but I see clips and stuff. And there's one where they're out to dinner, and Kyle Richards' blonde sister is yelling at Eileen Davidson, and she's like, I think I've had enough of you, you beast. And Eileen Davidson, her reaction is like, beast. The way she says it is so funny. And I just, every time I watch that clip, I laugh. And then somebody like reenacted it with dolls. I need to try to find that. Maybe I'll try to find that and post it on my, I always say I'm going to post stuff on my post tab. I try to remember, but I should try to find that, because the person like has these dolls, and I think they had a Lisa Rinna doll, because Lisa Rinna was there. She's on the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills or whatever. And so like all of them, and like reenacting the beast. That's good. We don't have to, I know that like Real Housewives is like honorary gay media, but it's not really gay media. We just, the gays, we love the messiness, but yeah, so those are like documentaries that I love. Another one that I love is I Am Divine, and there's an earlier one called Divine Trash, and that's the one that I think is very interesting, because John Waters talks about how Divine at the time was like the Godzilla of drag. She did not fit in, because everybody was doing all that shit that they were doing in The Queen. They were doing these pageants. They were trying to look very like traditional womanhood, all this kind of stuff. And Divine was none of that, was trying to be and so John Waters described her as the Godzilla of drag, which I thought was delicious and delightful. I Am Divine is very, very good. That's a good documentary. We showed that at a movie night for Pride one year. That, and then we showed Female Trouble, because a lot of people had already seen Pink Flamingo, so I was like, let's show Female Trouble. excuse me, it's a little bit lesser known. I mean, all of his like early underground work, there's a lot of people who haven't seen it. Pink Flamingos is weird and crazy. Yes, Lisa Rinna used to be on Days. She was the one that I liked with Bo. So when I was watching it, Hope had already died. There was a time where Hope died. They had this big event called the Cruise of Deception, and Hope died during the Cruise of Deception. So when I started watching it in high school, Hope wasn't on the canvas. So I never knew the big like romance super couple of Bo and Hope. I always knew Bo and Billy. Bo was with Lisa Rinna, who was Billy Reed. And then at some point he was with Carly. So then there was Carly. And she was also then like Princess Gina. Like it was a whole thing or whatever. But and so yeah, she was on Days. It was very strange. Pink Flamingos and Serial Mom. John Waters, all of John Waters' cinema, I think, is so good and so worth seeing. Female Trouble, I thought was fun, and I wanted to do that one for Pride because it's a very different sort of take where Female Trouble is the one where if you ever see, like RuPaul's Drag Race has done something kind of lampooning Female Trouble. The one with the cha-cha heels, if you ever hear like any jokes or references to like, good girls don't wear cha-cha heels. Like, I better get my black cha-cha heels. And so like Divine plays Dawn Davenport who wants cha-cha heels for Christmas and she doesn't get them. So she like pulls the tree down on her parents and like does this whole thing and runs away, and she ends up getting raped by a male character who is also played by Divine out of drag. We'll talk about that in a second, but like, and then has a baby. And then it's all about how crime becomes like a substitute for glamour. And so, or for beauty. And so Dawn Davenport is determined to become the most beautiful woman in the world by doing crime. And at some point she get like acid spilled on her face. So she's got this prosthetic and she's all crazy, and she's in her wild, crazy leopard print outfits, but she becomes the most beautiful woman in the world, and then she gets executed because she's like a murderer, so it's very wild and crazy, but it's got a lot of interesting stuff. And so that was something that I thought was very interesting, is that Divine, during sort of developed this with these underground films and things, but Divine in some ways didn't always think of himself as a drag queen. He saw himself as an actor. And so he created this character of Divine and is obviously most famous for the character of Divine, but he always insisted that he play some sort of male role in the film as well. So John Waters, when he was creating these films, would create the sort of Divine role, and then Glenn Milstead, who is Divine's out of drag name, his legal name, would also have like a male part. So like in Hairspray, the station owner, Arvin Hodgepile or whatever his name is, that's played by Divine out of drag, and then he played Mrs. Turnblad. So there was always something. And so that was kind of the weird thing with Female Trouble, is that Divine played both Dawn and the person who rapes Dawn. So it was very strange. It was very weird. Desperate Living is another good one. I was very lucky one time when I was on a training trip to Seattle. I got to see a lot of really good theater when I would travel to Seattle, and the Egyptian Theater had a midnight screening of, I don't know why my mind is drawing a blank, Monsters. No, Multiple Maniacs. That's why I was like, it's not Monsters. Multiple Maniacs. And with Multiple Maniacs, they had Peaches Christ introducing it, and they had a pre-show interview with Mink Stole. And I was very excited. I was there early. I got front row tickets, I got tickets, and then I was there in the front row because I got there super early. And so I got to see Peaches Christ interview Mink Stole all about those early Divine films, and it was fabulous. It was so fabulous. Such a good, that was the thing. That's why I loved being in Seattle, because there was always like weird artsy stuff that like a lot of it I would like search out, and there was a theater that I would always go to that always had shows going. But then I would just like, sometimes I'd be like walking somewhere, or I'd be driving, I'd be in an Uber, and I would just look and there'd be a theater being like, tonight only, here's this thing. And I'd be like, well, let's get a slice of pizza at Hot Mama's and head back to the Egyptian Theater. So yeah, I was so tired. I almost fell asleep during the movie, because that was the night that I saw Ben de la Creme had a show at I forget what the hall was called. But it was this venue that for years and years Ben Della Creme did shows at, and it was Inferno A Go Go, and it was like this. She was being this like she was like a 60s beach party girl, but she was going through Dante's Inferno, the levels of hell, with puppets. It was so good, and it was so, I wish there was a recording of it, because I would buy a recording, because it was so funny and it was so well written. And then it even made me cry. There was like, because the 6th level of hell was, there were harpies. So in Dante's Inferno there were harpies that harpies are buzzards. Now I'm kind of starting to confuse it a little bit with Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials trilogy, but buzzards or harpy, whatever it was, doesn't really matter. And so, and the 6th level of hell is where the suicides are sent, according to the Inferno. And so then the puppet is like this harpy or this vulture or whatever it was, and has this like really beautiful monologue that she delivers through a puppet, all about how, because in Dante's Inferno they said that they were sent there to be tormented, and this harpy is just like, those poor kids didn't do nothing to anybody, and like it's so beautiful, and it was like a tearjerker moment. And I wish I had a recording of that because it was so good. But yeah, so those are some fabulous things. It looks like Dion has gone live, so in my phone that continues to go off over and over and over and over and over again. And so I think we can probably wrap this up here pretty soon, because I know that Dion is live as well. But yeah, so that's kind of some queer cinema. Those are some documentaries that I love. I mean, there's lots of narrative film as well. Maybe it's too late for this year's Pride, but maybe we'll just do a random live sometime where we talk about some other like queer narrative films and some different things that we can kind of explore. But this is kind of my main recommendation. I don't know, this year I was just in the mood to talk about like history and cinema history, especially like films and stuff. So very excited for that. An announcement is going to be coming soon. This only matters if you are in North Dakota and want to come to Grand Forks, but at some point we are going to be doing a series of drag brunch and bingo. So that is something that we're going to try. So far we're planning one for like July and then August to see how it goes, and it may become a semi-regular thing, maybe a monthly thing, as kind of a series for one of our local theaters. So we're going to maybe start doing some of that. I do have my annual trip to the pool house for my photo shoot with Brooklyn Ewing from Dirt Candy Productions. That's coming up the first week of August. So there are some things. I am going to be at Minot Pride, which is the last weekend of August. And so I'm going to be there for that. So there are some things. And then if there's any news, like I said, I'll probably post an update about the email that I got from Dakota Outright. But if there is some sort of, I have an idea in mind to pitch to them to kind of, because I don't think I'm going to continue on with them. And I don't know, you know, in terms of how things just kind of ended, it's a little bit, but I do wish them well. And I think there are better people on the board now. And so I'm trying to figure out a way to sort of exit gracefully after this time where they sort of exited me not gracefully. So I'm trying to help heal some of I want to help them sort of heal some of that. But again, they caused it. It's their problem. But if I can help them rebuild in some way, I will try to do that. So look for updates on those kinds of things. Let's see if I can remember my outro. Also, before we do the outro, don't forget about Wacky Wednesdays. So we are going to be still going live each Wednesday. We're going to be doing Wacky Wednesdays all through July. So every Wednesday in July, we have a colorful foundation look. So the first, July 1st is going to be a green look. July 8th is going to be an orange look. July 15th is going to be a red foundation look. 15th, 22nd is going to be a metallic, maybe metallic gold, but maybe metallic gold with other, because I do have a few metallic foundations. So like metallic, some sort of metallic foundation look. And then on the 29th, we're going to have a pastel gradient look. So we're going to have some fun with colorful foundation in July. I'm very excited. It's going to be very creative and fulfilling, and it'll I hope it'll clear out some of the gunk in my. Sometimes I feel like my creativity, I don't get to like do as much of my creative pursuits as I would like. I don't have as much time for filming and that kind of stuff. So I'm trying to get back into it and trying to make more time. So I think those will be good. So let's see if I can remember my outro. Thank you everybody for coming. All of you who are here in chat, I would love it if you would circle back around and leave a comment down below when this becomes a video. Help me feed the beast, help me feed the algorithm. While you are down there, don't forget that you can hit that subscribe button to become part of the fam. Hit that. No, I'm doing this too early. While you are down there, don't forget that you can hit that thumbs up to tell me that you appreciated this. Or if you are like, girl, why are you always talking about these old movies? We want to see the new, the now. I'm going to see the back rooms at the movie theater tonight. I don't want to hear about all this history. Go ahead and give me that thumbs down. It is all engagement. The algorithm isn't a picky bitch, and neither am I. And while you're down there, hit that subscribe button, become part of the family, and hit the bell icon so you'll be notified of all future uploads. I try really hard to make sure I have at least one video or live per week. And if you're lucky, if you're very lucky, you might even get a bonus video. Ooh, Priscilla-rific. If you'd like to chat, banter, or commiserate between uploads, all of my social media will be linked down in the description box below, including a link to my website, just pretend it's there, The World of Champagne at JanessaJ.com. Thank you so much for watching. I love and appreciate all of you. I hope you have a wonderful night. I hope your Wednesday went well. We're over the hump. We've only got 2 more days till the weekend, and next week we get a long weekend because of the 4th of July, so I hope everybody's doing well. If you're here in the U.S., if you're not, you might not get a long weekend. But I hope everybody's doing well. And until I see you again, bye. How do I turn this off? Okay, there we go. All right, there we go. Bye-bye.